My name is Julia. If you don't know me, I use she, her pronouns, and I live on Wabanaki land. A quick visual description is that I'm a Palestinian American white woman with short brown hair, pink bangs, a keffiyeh headband, and an orange shirt. My background is the Palestinian flag with our Centering Palestine logo on it. The packet has been added to the chat. Go ahead and open it up so that you can follow along there on your computer and also avoid any Zoom glitches. Sometimes Zoom won't let you copy things out of the chat. It's very strange, only happens occasionally, but go ahead and click on that link in the chat, and that will just help you have all the information you need for tonight. This event is organized by Palestinian, Jewish, and ally contributors, and I'm going to briefly go over our community agreements. After that, I do our little news segment. You're probably used to this. During that news segment, we put our content warning up, which means that we don't admit any new folks to Zoom. If you do, for some reason, end up coming late, that's totally okay. If you get stuck in the waiting room, don't worry, it is probably just the news segment, and within 5 minutes, you will be let into the main session. With that, let's do the short version of the community agreements. You can look at the longer version in the chat or on our link tree. We're a COVID cautious event, and we ask that attendees be respectful of that intersection. What that means is that we don't talk about organizing in ways that don't take important accessibility measures like COVID precautions. We are pro-Palestine, of course. We do not tolerate anti-Semitism or Islamophobia of any kind. We are anti-Zionist. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Zionism is a settler colonial nationalist movement, and geopolitical powers like the US and Israeli governments have worked really hard to make Zionism and Jewishness synonymous. This is inaccurate and only serves to further harm Jewish and Palestinian communities. We center marginalized voices and oppressed groups, particularly right now Palestinians. We use content warnings when appropriate. And in terms of chat etiquette, everyone does a great job, but we ask that comments in the chat stay focused on the task at hand, just so that we can stay on track with all the important things we'd like to complete in our hour. With that, I'm going to go into our news segment. We are going to put this content warning in effect. You are able to turn down your own volume if you would like to not hear this part. That's okay. We will put in the chat when we're done, so that way you know to turn your volume back up. I also always advise that if you have kids in hearing range, that you put in headphones. In general, our sessions aren't geared toward kids, but especially the news segment has, some more distressing topics. Let's get started. We have a lot of news to cover today and a very interesting mix of good news, not so good news. So today is day 179, and at least 33,301 Palestinians have been killed since November. This number is likely much higher given the collapse of the health ministry and the healthcare systems, as well as the number of people that are missing. I did want to start off with some good news. A new Gallup poll shows that the majority of the US now disapprove of Israeli action in Gaza. We now have more people disapprove, and we have more people that have no opinion. And I haven't seen as many people comment on that, but I think that's also a sign of discontent, even if people aren't willing to be decisive about it. So that is great news. Definitely check out that Gallup poll. They lay it out very nicely. The third topic here is much more serious. 7 workers have been killed from the relief group Work Central Kitchen, abbreviated WCK. While Israel says the attack was unintended and tragic, the IDF has historically, and during these last 6 months, blocked incoming aid and targeted aid workers. So following the killing of these aid workers, many pro-Palestine supporters are criticizing the lack of international outcry. If something like this happened in any other country, there would be a very different response from the international community. You can catch up on both an Al Jazeera video and an article on what is happening there. In terms of what else is happening in Gaza right now, the Al-Shifa hospital, I think we've all been hearing about on our news feeds. After a 2-week raid on this hospital, the IDF withdrew, leaving absolute horrors behind. Terrible reports of torture, executions, and brutality are extensive, as more than 300 Palestinians were killed. The few survivors and witnesses in the area say the horrors were just absolutely indescribable. So the situation in Gaza continues to be extremely dire. Another piece of good news amidst a lot of horror, Japan has lifted the pause on its funding for UNRWA following suit from Canada and Australia. Germany has also increased its funding, making it the top donor of UNRWA for this year. So it is encouraging that we are seeing more countries restore this really important funding. Our next topic, number 5, while Netanyahu would have us believe that he represents the will of Israelis and even the Jewish community at large, thousands of Israeli demonstrators continue to gather, calling for Netanyahu to resign. These protests are calling for the release of the remaining Israeli captives, who Netanyahu has basically only endangered in the last 6 months. They're also calling for him to step down, as he's only held on to power using legal loopholes, and it's past time for a new election cycle. Unsurprisingly, rather than listening to protesters or to the international community, Israeli lawmakers instead have approved a law that can shut foreign news networks that they deem a security risk, or a so-called security risk. Netanyahu says he will use the law to shut down Al Jazeera immediately. This is a very breaking story, I believe, from the last 24 or 48 hours, so we're going to have to keep our eye on this. Next, I have another piece of good news in here. While challenges are certainly overwhelming, this week we got another important win in England. Palestine Action reports, and this is a quote from their press release, "Relentless direct action has secured another victory in the fight against Israel's arms trades, as Elbit Systems are forced to sell their elite KL factory in Tamworth. The company had previously manufactured cooling and power management systems for military vehicles, but was sold after stating that it faced falling profits and increased security costs resulting from Palestine Action's efforts." So they have been working hard. I believe this is the second or third location that they have been able to shut down. It is very cool progress, and they're working hard to maintain that. Next, in U.S. news, Anel Sheline is the next among several State Department officials to resign over Gaza. In her news interview, she said that many in the State Department feel the way she does, and she just couldn't keep silent. This only highlights how the current administration is not listening to its constituents, nor many of the government workers and officials on the Hill. I really encourage you to check out both those links, as they have various interviews from her. We've just got a couple items left here. In pop culture news, Egyptian-American actor Remy Youssef made headlines after bringing up Palestine in his SNL monologue. This included saying, "Please free the people of Palestine," which was met with applause from the audience. While a few lines in a monologue aren't enough to sum up what we wish we could see said about Palestine, this is important progress to see a high-profile actor on SNL get to say something like this. I encourage you to read Dean Obadallah's opinion piece for their full take on the story. In international news, Israel continues their series of terrible decisions as they are suspected to be behind the destruction of the Iranian consulate in Syria. The missile strike killed 7 people, including Senior Commander General Zahedi. Iran has promised a decisive response, and this only adds to the long list of regional tensions that Israel is causing. I've been saying this for several months if you've been coming to these news segments, but America really needs to count the cost of Israeli aggression, especially when Israel has so few allies in the Middle East and are only increasing tension. Now for an update on Sudan, the Sudanese people continue to face dire circumstances as warring sides are resulting in soaring food prices and lessened production. This man-made famine is a humanitarian disaster. While Sudan has not been getting the attention it deserves, Forbes just this week published an article highlighting this crisis and highlighting the lack of attention that it's getting. I hope that this represents greater public awareness and can lead to more positive action. The biggest headline for the DRC, and the last thing I'm going to mention today, is that they have just named their first female prime minister. This is happening during continued violence, and Prime Minister Tuluka pledged to prioritize peace. The biggest challenge she will face is to create a new government that includes negotiating with many political factions. Definitely check out that article from Africa News. It is very accessible in terms of not being too dense or academic-y. And I would encourage you just to give that a quick read so that you have a better picture of the political situation the new prime minister will face. With that, our content warning is lifted. Okay, we are going to move into our action section. There we go. So we're going to work on a petition to support South Africa, or rather stop the US from increasing sanctions. We're going to check out a really cool tool where you can see if products you're buying are supporting apartheid. And then in our breakout rooms, we're going to go through an email campaign. As I mentioned last week, these email campaigns often vary slightly by country in terms of their content, but are all working toward the overall goal of a ceasefire or an end to occupation in Palestine. So let's do action 1 together. This is specifically about a US bill, but we tested it because the form allows you to put in quite a lot of countries. And so we had a US person test it and a Canada person test it. So hopefully it will work for everyone else as well. What this bill is trying to do, I'll just read the introduction here. It says, "We, US or other country supporters of diplomacy and international law, applaud South Africa for appealing to the ICJ to prosecute Israel for genocide in Gaza and urge all members of Congress to oppose this bill, the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act. So that very long-titled act is basically imposing sanctions, extra sanctions on South Africa, which, hurt trade, exports, imports, that kind of thing. Pretty much is a very barely disguised punishment for prosecuting Israel. So let's take the next 5 minutes, take a few minutes to read that email. You can see, I'll show you what it looks like. I have it pulled up here. You can read the text on the left, excuse the scroll, and then you can put your information in here. So you can see it just asks you for your general information, and down here at the bottom, you have total control. If you want email updates, if you want your name published on the petition, totally up to you. As a reminder, this is a petition, so you only want to sign it once versus an email that you can send a million times. So go ahead and take that time to read that and to fill this out. Again, it has a lot of countries, and we did test the US and Canada, so we know that at least those countries will work. Anyone can actually sign it because it is a public petition. We always like to say no pressure to do any of this. This is just an invitation. Let me go to our second item that we're going to do together. Again, thank you to the volunteer that brought this next item to our attention. This was created by Palestinian Irish and Kashmiri Canadian wife and husband, and the site allows you to follow the money trail on your favorite brand's involvement. So there's not a direct action for you to do. I just really want it on your radar. You can explore the website, you can bookmark the link. If you're on your phone, I think it had one of those, not app things, but you can add a shortcut to your phone. And if you feel so inclined, I'll show you in a second, but they have links to all of their socials. So you're welcome to follow them or boost them there. I really just wanted to bring it to your attention so you can do what you would like with this time. But so this is what it looks like. And you can search for any brand. Someone was talking about Annie's mac and cheese earlier, so I'm gonna search that. And you can see here it has caution, and then it gives the reason. So over 40% of General Mills stock is owned by Vanguard, etc., BlackRock, who invest heavily in the weapons industry. So it's really cool to see what they do. You can also see, I want to do a positive example. Let me try. I know if you're a beauty person like me, so here it says Huda publicly stated that she is prepared to risk her entire business for her pro-Palestine stance. So this is a really cool thing that they do. And it includes alternatives, which is really helpful because sometimes it's easy to look at the list of what you can't buy and then be kind of lost for what you can. So definitely some cool options. And I always encourage, this is not from a stance to make you feel like you can't do anything, but to empower you to say, okay, I have the ability to make a different choice here. And I wanted just to show you, I know up here on the right, it has the social icons, but if you actually scroll down, they have more. I don't know, it's just how the website is built, but they also have TikTok. And then this little icon is a copy. So you can actually copy the URL if you have a different platform you wanna share about or follow them on. So yeah, I just thought this was so cool. So thank you to the volunteer that showed us this. They also have a submit a brand for review form. So that's a cool way you can help too if you're curious or maybe you know a good brand. Definitely save that for later. Great to explore, and like we're saying, hopefully they will keep getting bigger and bigger with more information. Let's go to our breakout rooms. This is going to be about just 5 minutes to fill out your appropriate email form. Like I said, just for this week, we have the US room and the non-US room because I have a specific US-based resource that I want to show, and we made sure we had lots of options for our other countries too, including Canada, Australia, UK, which has quite a lot of options there too.
So hi everybody, I am Kevin. I go by he or they pronouns. I am calling from Muscogee land. And a quick visual description of me is, let's see, I'm wearing a white shirt and a blue and white striped hat. I have glasses. Let's see, dark brown hair and beard, and I'm white, Ashkenazi, and mixed, mostly British Isles. So we are going to be focusing in on spring in-person protest and COVID. We wanted to do this because even though some parts of the United States are actually still getting snow, which is hard for me to wrap my mind around, Where I am right now, it is 73 degrees Fahrenheit, so a little over room temperature. So in terms of Celsius, it's basically around 20 or so. Um, so with this nice weather, we know a lot of people are probably going to be interested in attending protests in person. I'm going to give a few caveats, and then I'm going to touch on if you're organizing protests or know the event organizers, and then if you're interested in attending an event and do not know the organizers. Okay, so our caveats. First, there's a caveat on COVID safer protesting. There are many ways to protest, and we support you in protesting in COVID safer ways that work for you. So this may mean not attending in-person protest, and we respect your decision on this if so. We're focusing on in-person protesting in this week's education section because again, just to reiterate, we know many self-governing people may want to attend protests in person, but have questions about safety. Our focusing on this topic this week is not meant to minimize or dismiss those who choose not to attend protests in person. What we're doing is we're adopting a harm reduction frame so you have more information to make decisions that are best for you. And then we also have a caveat on what we're not covering. There are many aspects to protest safety. For the sake of time, we're focusing on direct COVID mitigation strategies. Please see the resource compilation for more material on digital safety and know your rights for protesters. And we will also be adding additional resources to a compilation on safety considerations around who you're organizing with, because whether it's deliberate, such as in cases of infiltration or inadvertent, some people do organize in such a way that they create risk. So we'll have some considerations around that. Some considerations around grifting at protests. Unfortunately, not everybody who attends protests are good actors. There are some people who will, go and promote a GoFundMe campaign that goes to their personal bank account as opposed to actually helping people in Gaza. And we're also going to be adding some resources as well on white nationalist and Zionist targeting of protesters. And then also along with that, some resources on protest de-escalation. Many protests do have safety marshals, there are a lot of supports and resources for many protests. Okay, so we're going to touch base on if you're organizing a protest or know the event organizers. We've pulled some suggestions from you can, for more suggestions, you can see action planning for COVID safety and the People's CDC Guide to More Accessible Protest. Both of those are in the session packet in the chat. Okay, so a first suggestion for organizers is to really center your planning in community. Please offer ways to be involved if people cannot attend in person. So for instance, you can offer participation in art builds before a protest, behind the scenes support or publicity, such as, contacting media outlets. Let's see, advanced letter writing, you can do live streams of protests. You can have people call or video message in participation, to speak at protest. So these may all be options to include people with different access needs. You can also consider laying out messages, art, or photos for people who aren't physically present, and that can have a big visual impact too. Let's see, we also suggest that you publicize your expected COVID precautions in advance and how you will enforce or encourage them. Your local mask book can be a good resource to help you think through precautions, how to encourage or enforce them, and also how to let still COVIDing activists know what to expect. To the degree that you can, please think through and plan for other forms of accessibility too, such as ASL and other language interpretation, visual and audio descriptions, and wheelchair and stroller accessibility. Do try to partner with activists who have different access needs to make your event more inclusive. And likewise, also please consider ways you can be in solidarity with and signal boost work from communities who are indigenous to the land you will be protesting on. to whom you may or may not belong to. And I just also want to flag that thinking through accessibility and solidarity is a way to show what you're for and that you take community care and well-being seriously. And this in turn may then invite attendees to take COVID precautions more seriously as well. Please take some time to think through the physical layout and location of your protest. Outdoor protests are generally better for COVID safety than indoor. Try to avoid indoor protest if you can. If you can't, you can open windows and use air filtration. There are a lot of guides to building Corsi Rosenthal box filters online. Some mask blocks are building them and may be able to make them available to you. Also, where possible, try and do actions that require spacing between attendees, such as a human circle or a chain where people are spaced apart. And you can consider organizing multiple location actions or multiple smaller actions rather than one large action. What that does is it reduces people density at actions. Just also please note that it might be harder for media to cover these actions. So you might want to have your media liaisons accommodate that and make video or photos of your protest available in one location for media. And testing at protest. Please encourage people to test before attending and to plug in alternative ways if they do test positive. Encourage testing before attending, even if people don't have symptoms. And we suggest using messaging that they are helping to keep their community and each other safe. Positive messaging. Many prospective attendees may have heard CDC or other quote unquote public health messaging that isolation isn't necessary anymore if someone has COVID. So you may have to explain that you are asking people to participate remotely if they test positive because different community members have different vulnerabilities to COVID. A preponderance of research shows COVID is not just a flu and can have severe debilitating effects that flu does not. Risk of long COVID increases with repeat infections, and long-term effects of COVID are still unknown. You can consider having a fact sheet available online or printed out with COVID tests explaining why you encourage testing, how keeping communities safe through the precautionary principle is important, and what resources people can access to learn more about the science of COVID and COVID precautions that they can take now, even if they haven't taken them before. And if feasible, you can consider having tests available at protests, both to encourage their use and also to normalize COVID testing. And then also just to note, if you are participating in an arrestable action or planning an arrestable action, please have all participants COVID tests and isolate appropriately before the action. And this is actually to reduce transmission risk to vulnerable people in jails. That only took me several times to say. But yeah, people who aren't able to take the same level of precautions that many people in the community are able to. And note on masks at protest. Please encourage masking and make high filtration non-counterfeit masks available at events. Have a plan for distributing masks. This might mean having folks wander through crowds, distributing them, or setting up distribution tables. Discuss masking in terms of making the event safer and more accessible for more people. Again, that positive framing. You can also point out and select activist spaces that masking may thwart facial recognition software. You might not want to say this at a public rally, just because such words, can end up inspiring local mask bans. But this messaging can be appropriate to share on, for example, an activist signal group. You can offer masks to local organizers or connect them to a local mask block if you're in a position to do either. And you can also offer to help organizers come up with a distribution plan for mask at events. This is if you're not directly organizing a protest or connected to people who are. You can also consider including visual diagrams of how to properly wear a mask and mask kits to try to discourage wearing a mask below the nose or mouth. And if you're able to, you can consider providing masks that are a mix of black, green, red, and white. Even if you don't have a logo or the Palestinian flag on mask, attendees may recognize these colors of the Palestinian flag and be more likely to wear masks as a result. You could also use color to indicate mask size. Okay, and then if you are interested in attending and do not know the organizers, we have some thoughts. So, first bit of suggestions here are we suggest that you assess risk and what risk you're comfortable taking. You can ask, does the event announce what COVID precautions will be taken or are expected? Does the event say how COVID precautions will be encouraged or enforced? Is the event outside? Are there alternative ways to support the event or be involved besides in person? Do the event organizers acknowledge accessibility and solidarity need beyond COVID? This may indicate a greater openness to being able or capacity to being able to incorporate COVID precautions in future actions. Do you expect you will be able to distance at the event? How would you get to the event and what risk is involved? Is the event likely to result in arrest? Which may then put you in more of a higher COVID risk situation that you might have to plan for if you're planning on getting arrested. What precautions, if any, is the event taking to separate counter protesters physically who may not believe in masking? Will the event be stationary or will it involve physical movement? What COVID mitigation strategies do you have access to? What is current and projected COVID risk based on wastewater surveillance? What do you feel comfortable with? Finally, the most important question there. And again, you can always refer to these slides in the session packet. Let's see, we have some thoughts on masking for community and personal protection too. I think many of the people on this Zoom know that masks can help mitigate risk and are really an essential protest tool. Some of the information we're about to present may be old news to you. And some people may also be new to taking more robust COVID precautions at protest. And Palestine protests can offer opportunities for people who hadn't previously been taking precautions to start doing so now. So if you find this a helpful refresher, or if you learn something new, either way, we're happy. Okay, so we're going to just highlight a few broad categories of masks that are classified as high filtration masks. So N95s, KN95s, KF94s, and P100s. We're not getting into specific brands or additional mask types because accessibility varies across the world. We're also not addressing fit testing today, not because we discourage it, but because fit testing is not equally accessible to everyone. And we want this presentation to be accessible and not overwhelming for protesters who are newer to taking COVID precautions as well. Okay, so N95s. These filter at least 95% of airborne particles when they're properly fit, maintained, replaced, worn, and used. They do not filter oil-based particles. They are approved by the U.S. National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. Certified masks should have business name, part number, filter series, and efficacy, such as N95, a testing and certification number, and NIOSH and caps. Check for approval by looking for the testing and certification approval number on the mask, and you can search for the number in the NIOSH certified equipment list. That link is in the chat. You can also check the list that CDC maintains weekly of NIOSH approved N95s, and you can also check, it's actually a pretty paltry NIOSH alert list of known counterfeit products. That's in the chat. So in terms of checking certification, this next slide just shows the different parts of what we just said and what that might look like on a mask. So approval holder, the testing and certification number, NIOSH and bold mask, et cetera, et cetera. A N95 may be counterfeit if it has decorative features, if it uses ear loops without a fastener behind the head, if it says it's FDA approved. The FDA does not approve N95s, though they do clear surgical N95s. Let's see, or if it says it's approved for children. NIOSH does not evaluate masks for children. Alterations can also avoid NIOSH approval, including user alterations. And then an additional resource to check out is Project N95. They vetted mask and they have links current as of January 31st of 2024. They also adjust mask sizing and non-NIOSH approved masks for children. They vetted several types of masks, not just N95s. And also, if the mask is FDA registered, that is not an endorsement of quality. It just means that the mask, the FDA is aware that the mask exists, essentially. Okay, so then KN and N95s. These filter at least 95% of airborne particles and match Chinese standards. They typically have ear loops, which differs from N95s. Many, though not all, KN95s have a flat fold. And authentic KN95s have a manufacture date, a 2 or 3 year expiration date, and GB 2626 2006 or GB 2626 2019 on them. And expiration date will be on authentic mask because the electrostatic charge that blocks particles lessens over time. The GB codes indicate the approval standard used. Counterfeits can also have this mask, so just as a heads up. And a KN95 is counterfeit if it says NIOSH approved, because NIOSH doesn't have jurisdictions over KN95s. And then again, FDA approved is another indication that a KN95 is counterfeit, because the FDA does not have jurisdiction over KN95s and does not issue approvals. It may say it's FDA listed or registered. This is not approval, but means the FDA knows the mask exists. KF94s, these are certified in Korea and filter 94% of airborne particles. Many are flat fold or have a boat design, and ear loops are common. In this slide, we have 2 photos of KF94s. These colors aren't quite the red or green of a Palestinian flag, but you can extrapolate there. Maroon and I guess like a sage green color. KF94s are certified in Korea and filter 94% of airborne particles. They are counterfeit if they say NIOSH approved, because again, NIOSH does not have jurisdiction over KF94s. FDA approved is another indication that a mask is counterfeit, because the FDA does not have jurisdiction over KF94s and does not issue approvals. And a mask may state it's FDA listed or registered. Again, that's not approval. It just means the FDA knows the mask exists. And then just a note on KF94s, if you're buying for a large number of people, KF94s may offer versatility for a variety of faces. And in terms of P100s, these are pretty high-powered masks. They filter at least 99.97% of particles, including oil-based ones. Their design can vary from more obvious respirator styles to more subtle ones. And on this slide, we have some photos of those differences. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention maintains a list of NIOSH-approved P100 masks that's updated weekly. P100 mask may give additional protection to those seeking it for health or transmission control reasons, extended actions, particularly crowded and or poorly ventilated actions, or actions expected to have unmasked counter-protesters who may try to literally get in your face. P100s may thwart facial recognition software more than surgical N95, KN95, or KF94 masks, though this is not clear. P100s may offer some protection also against chemicals such as tear gas or skunk spray, these really nasty smelling spray that's starting to show up at US protests, although also this is not clear as well. And a quick note on protest-centered masks. There aren't many protest-themed masks advertised online. You may come across cloth ones or some being sold in another country. Please look for authenticity. Masks may not be certified because design alteration technically should require new certification. There have been custom logo masks advertised in the past. These may need certification for each new design. Um, and it might be hard to find custom logo masks right now, though, since more people increasingly believe COVID is quote unquote over and demand seems to be decreasing. If you do come across a company advertising a custom logo mask, please let us know. Also, please check if the mask is from a manufacturer that typically has certified masks, and ask about certification given design alteration. Um, and just also a more specific note on this, there has not been much research on how logos or dyes can affect mask performance. The main concern would be that logos or dyes could affect the electrostatic functioning of masks, which is a large part of how masks filter out airborne particles. And this may depend, at least in part, on how deep a logo imprints into the mask. Also, a heads up, research suggests that masking over an N95 mask may reduce the effectiveness of the N95 by causing pressure, which increases leaks. So this may mean that using a cloth mask with a Palestine themed logo over N95 may reduce the mask effectiveness. Building relationships with organizers. So if you don't currently have relationships with people or groups who are organizing protests or actions, you might still be able to cultivate some. So that can help you help organizers in making events more accessible, building up their capacity to take COVID precautions, and better practice solidarity. You might reach out to organizers with offers to help connect them with mask blocks, find funders for masks for protest, think through alternative actions for accessibility, build Corsi Rosenthal boxes, assemble mask kits, which could be individually wrapped masks, diagrams on how to properly wear a mask, information on how COVID precaution connects with Palestine solidarity and why COVID matters, how anyone is invited to start taking new precautions at any time, even if you haven't before, credible sites for monitoring COVID levels, where to find out, where to learn more about long COVID. These are all just possibilities, just some thoughts. Let's see, in terms of finding mask blocks, we also just wanted to give a resource on this. There are many ways to find mask blocks, and new mask blocks are being started many places. You might learn of mask blocks local to you through, say, a local anarchist or feminist bookstore, an activist cafe, or bulletin board, or social media. And if you don't see something by you initially, please don't get discouraged. You may be able to network with others and or mask blocks or COVID cautious groups in nearby regions to connect with a mask block that is more local to you. And this Instagram can be a helpful starting place that is in the chat. And we also just wanted to shout out a few activist organizations that do center COVID precautions. So groups focusing on Palestine solidarity might not have capacity to take on COVID precaution organizing or education more directly, but they might be open to outside groups or organizing or hosting presentations or workshops on COVID and organizing Palestine. This could take the form of inviting someone or a group to talk about masks and demonstrate proper wearing at an event, organize mask kits, do teach-ins on disability justice in Palestine, or raise awareness about COVID precautions in event advertising. You might find interested groups of people via mask blocks, COVID social groups, or disability organizations that center COVID cautiousness and value Palestine solidarity together. Such disability organizations may be able to refer you to sibling organizations closer to you. And a few examples to shout out of disability organizations that center COVID caution and Palestine solidarity include New Disabled South, Disability Visibility Project, and the Abolition and Disability Justice Collective. And you may also want to check out One Free Community, which is a disability justice, mutual aid, and human rights group that also centers Palestine. Also, I'll just give you a few possible resources on funding for masks at protest. So purchasing a large number of masks can be expensive, and you or event organizers may want or need to enlist help with funding. You might be able to use a combination of crowdsourced mutual aid assistance and grant or larger private donor funds to cover masks. There are some philanthropic grant making organizations that might be interested that can be found through directories of funders, such as Candide, which used to be known as like the Foundation Center Directory. I forget which one. So a lot of these directories might allow some free access, but have tiered pay structures to access more information. And also just a heads up, many grants are made by funds or funders that aren't advertised or listed. To find such possible funds, you may need to do some networking with funders that you can find in directories, that you can find from aligned nonprofits, and funders that you can access through targeted searching or covered groups. Some possible starting places to include funding resources and documents made for Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities to respond to COVID, as well as funders who have publicly stated commitment to Palestine. If there may be many organizations, groups, or mass blocks interested in soliciting donations, you may want to coordinate with each other so you're engaging more efficiently with possible funders and can share resources between you. Also, if there are more people or groups interested in funding mask, it may be more likely that somebody already has connections with possible funders, and that might be able to be leveraged, which is awesome. The links are in the session packet. It's just two graphics that's promoting mask wearing at protests that you might be interested in seeing, possibly sharing around. And then this is the last slide here. I just wanted to include a piece from the conversation. It's called "Why Protest If It Doesn't Make a Difference?" These synopsises, it does matter, and they include some thoughts on more effective protest. I think it's just good to always have reminders that what we do does matter. So we are going to wrap up. We're actually going to skip our closing song today to save it for next time. As always, please feel free to fill out our feedback form. And next week, we will be highlighting the situation in the West Bank. There has been a lot of talk about what's going on in Gaza, and there's also a lot of really horrible things happening in the West Bank right now that's not getting as much attention. So we do want to give some attention to what is happening in the West Bank. Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining. As always, feel free to access material in the session packet. If anything in it is helpful to share more widely, also please do that too. We definitely do want to proselytize COVID precautions as well. So thank you, and thank you to Julia and our backup support team for all of your work on this.